Hello, are we live? Are we live? Yes, we're live. Nice. I had some problems, let's say, um, just just before going on. Um, but all of that's fixed. Barely in time. I'm quite happy. Hello, guys. Hello. And yeah, I was called to do this lecture very abruptly, let's say, and I had to think up a topic, and I'm kind of happy that I got a chance to start on lectures because sounds super low. Okay, I can fix that. I can fix that. Wait, why is it this low? What? Oh, it forgot the filters. Yeah, the 1 second. That can be fixed. Yeah, the issue is that I was working with the stream, like with the overlay, but I was working from my normal account, and I hadn't logged into the NGD account yet. So then I realized when I tried to go live 10 minutes ago, well, wait, I'm not logged into the NGD account. So I had to log out, I had to export the overlays and import them back into the account. And unfortunately, it doesn't import the filters for the audio and things like that. So yeah, that was an unfortunate discovery. But yeah, well, if everything's okay now, let's start. Um, yeah, on the lecture topic, um, I've been thinking for a while that I really wanted to do something based around NGD players' games. No, I can't just change the stream key. I thought I could. That's why I messed up. I thought I could, but then I tried using the NGD stream key and didn't work. Anyway, the the idea that I had was that I really wanted to do a lecture around NGD players' games and let's say some common mistakes that I see in you guys' games because I thought it's a good way to help. And I had a lot of topics in mind that I wanted to do, and it was kind of difficult to choose. In the end, I went for good and bad exchanges because exchanges are a very universal topic in Go. E- Philosophically speaking, anything can be considered an exchange, and when you're making an exchange, a lot of the concepts that you need to apply to make a good exchange are applicable to a lot of other parts of Go. Some of the other topics were a little bit more convoluted. Like I thought about co. I really wanted to do co, but co is much harder to do because co is a harder topic. Um, and some of the other topics were, for example, Tenuki, but Matthias did Tenuki recently, so I didn't want to oversaturate the topic. And oh yeah, Godave. That's exactly what I'm going to do. Just stop making bad exchanges. That's the secret. And in fact, that then you just shouldn't play moves, and then you'll be 6 done. Actually, there's some people that get to 6 done by doing nothing, like just play moves. Don't play exchanges. Just play in the corners and stuff. That kind of works. Um. Anyway, so what I did was that I trolled through some of the NGD games that I've reviewed in the past, and I looked for, you know, some exchanges that had stood out to me as not that good, and I wanted to go over some examples of some of the things that you guys are making as exchanges. And the thing is, these exchanges are not only bad. There's when you make an exchange, there's all kinds of things that you get from it, right? And when you make an exchange, it's usually because you want something. It's like, oh, I want this ladder breaker, or when I get this exchange, this reading sequence will work, or I just want a little bit more ice space for my group. There's always something you want with an exchange. And the thing is that when you make an exchange, there's also a lot of other things you're affecting on the board that aren't really that clear if you're not thinking about them. And that's why people sometimes make bad exchanges, I think, is that you're going to focus on what you want to get and not focus on the things that you're not getting anymore, the things that you're giving to your opponent. So those are factors that are easy to forget. And that's why I want to start by looking over some NGD games and kind of be mindful of why the exchange was played by you guys, what you guys had in mind, but also figure out why the exchange is maybe not that good, like what we're losing, what we're preventing ourselves from doing when we're making that exchange. And I'll probably be calling on you guys to get some ideas on evaluating these exchanges as well. With that said, I think we can go into the first example. Also, the examples are kind of, I tried to make them in order of difficulty, so we can ramp up into some exchanges that already are maybe not that clear that they're bad, or some examples that are a bit more nebulous. But the first ones are going to be maybe easier to discuss. This first game is from... Yeah, this first game is between, I think, two 10Q players. And it's... Let's see. Oh, yes. Okay. It's a very classic Joseki shape, right? I think a lot of you will know that here the Joseki for white will be to block. And then black's going to go up. And white's going to block. And then black has to live in the corner. Living in the corner is... Oh, wait. There's something in the settings I need to fix, but I'll do that in a minute. It's usual that black has to fix his shape in the corner, because otherwise he's locally dead. Let's say black tried to Utenuki, white's gonna hane, and white's gonna hane again, and voila, it's dead. So black has to fix. And once black fixes, white usually is going to go back and fix his shape on the outside, and this is, considered a Joseki. White, on the other hand, chose to make an exchange that kind of differs from the normal Joseki, and he pushed. He pushed instead. And I think this exchange that white made, this forcing move that, just forces black to connect on the second line, just has the idea, it's like the kind of forcing move that just gains you a point. But I'd like for you guys to suggest maybe some of the drawbacks that are offered by this exchange and what you're losing out on. And while you do that, I'm going to take the opportunity to fix an issue. Yeah, you can't do capture cursor with KGS because it's bugged. The cursor looks horrible, so there we go. Cursor's gone. It's probably better. Yeah. Yeah, indeed, it is a classic. I found a lot of examples of this kind of push in, let's say, some of our maybe like double-digit Q player games. Yeah, you're right, Antti. It's a big factor also whether you need to make an exchange, because you're not... If you don't need to do it now, and the exchange has any kind of drawback, you may consider doing it later, because then it will be clearer if you can actually do it, right? Then there's some exchanges you want to make very early, such as like question moves, because when you make a question move, like where the opponent has multiple answers, you want them to choose the wrong answer, right? The idea behind a probe exchange is that depending on the way that your opponent answers, you play differently, right? So then you need to do it earlier. And yeah. So Sealgo points out that one of the questions is, well, what about b14, right? b14 was white center before, and b14 also has some kind of value, right? It has, it's maybe going to get white some points if, let's say, later it's going to be easier for white to, enclose some extra points. It makes it a bit easier for white to play Yose in black's corner later on, right? So b14 has some kind of value. And I think there's also maybe another factor. C16 removes the b16 option. Yeah. That's an interesting way of looking at it. So c6, if white starts with c16, then say black played b14, right? This isn't sent to kill black anymore, because before you play b14 and you have the follow-up of this clamp, and even if black pushes, you can use the shape to kill black. Now, if you'd started with the push, and now you play here, black and Utenuki, you can't kill this, right? And it's a bit problematic for another reason that I think you guys maybe have missed for now, which is that forcing black to push at c15 is good for you. Getting an extra move on the outside is usually favorable. So in the game, if we look at the game, white pushed, and then white has this annoying cutting point at c15, right? And you don't need to fix it now, but it's kind of annoying. You have to do something about it sometime. And say you're going to Keima here at some point, you're gonna jump, and it's always nice to fix the cut when black has already pushed. Your shape is always a bit more complete if the opponent has actually already pushed. So this is maybe it's quite a classic example of maybe the exchange looks good because it looks like you're just getting 1 point in Sente, but you're not really getting much. And I think perhaps, if that's all right, we can move to the next topic, the next example, let's say. I think this is also, this is also a game between two double-digit Q players, strong double-digit Q players. And this one is also kind of a classic example. If you look at this situation, we can actually check a bit, before what happened. Black decided to cut, which is a fine decision. It's just locally starts a fight. White chooses to cut black's stone off this way. The more normal way is here, but it's not too big of a deal. And thus a fight starts. And then usually there's a proverb in Go, usually, that when you get cross-cut, when you get cut, you don't Atari, you extend. But here black chose to Atari. And I think this is also a very common example of an exchange that looks good when you first play it, kind of, when you first think of the move, and then you start to think about all of the problems that it entails, and then it doesn't look so good. So yeah. yeah, it kind of hurts my eyes as well, but it's not that low level of a mistake. I was reviewing, I think a couple of days ago, I reviewed a game between two 1Qs, and the same mistake happened. So it's not that uncommon for this mistake to occur even in higher level games. I think it's a bad it's a kind of a bad habit that a lot of people have, and that's a bit hard to, let's say, shake. And you could argue that people are often playing this kind of exchange just because it's sente, because it happens to arise that you can play it, so you do it, right? Yeah, and then only maybe later you realize about what you're doing. That, yeah, with withdrawal symptoms. I mean, that happens a lot with exchanges, right? Like you get something and you're like, oh my god, I got what I wanted, hooray, you know? And then maybe the game progresses and things start to go wrong and you think, oh well, maybe that wasn't that worth it. Instant gratification society, that's a good one. Yeah, so the main issue with the Atari, as I guess most of you will know, is that it fixes White's cutting point, right? You Atari, White connects. This isn't a problem for White anymore. And that has a lot of repercussions. It looks like a small detail maybe, but it's a huge issue because, say, Black connects now. White suddenly has a lot of options. He can try this geta, but it doesn't really work because Black kind of wriggles out. White can't capture actually, right? M5 doesn't work. N5, however, it doesn't work per se in the sense that it doesn't capture, but Black's only way to escape is to do this and get squeezed like this, and that's not pretty. You're not happy to have this group. It's a bit of a disaster for Black. So, you know, for probably once White captures, once White gets us like this, yeah, exactly. It's better to die. You Utenuki and you accept it, and you have some agi to use there later. It's not terrible, but if Black had omitted the exchange and just extended, White can't do any of this. Like what White can, there's not that much White can do to the shape. I think my best guess is probably to just extend or something and play out the fight, or maybe you can first connect here, and Black's gonna play here, and the fight continues. And point being, White wants to fix this cutting point anyway, so Black would never play A here, ever. So it's a bit of an unfortunate exchange to make. Yeah. And what do we say to the God of Death? I don't know. Die another day. I don't know. Anyway, these two exchanges were quite simple. I think they're not. I think probably the people that are the people that played them also kind of get a good intuition for why the exchange didn't work out. But the examples are probably going to get a bit harder in general. This next one is very interesting because the player that made the exchange in question is getting something important. So there's a reason to make the exchange. There's a very, it's clear that White had a specific mindset as to why he wanted to make the exchange, but it's not that advisable in that situation. And actually the game level here is quite a bit higher. I think the players were 3Q and 2Q, and Black peeped here. And this kind of peep, we've kind of all faced this kind of peep. It's like, so annoying, let's say. You have to connect. Connecting isn't fun, right? And then later Black's gonna play this one as well, and you're not too happy about it. Just because you're I don't know, you're answering, right? And then black's probably going to have to connect his stones, because otherwise, potentially this white cut is actually quite severe. So say you connect, and the game continues, right? Black is probably quite a bit better because he infiltrated white's Moyo very successfully, and he still has some prospects, like some potential on the lower right. So I probably like black here, but white can play this game. It's not that bad, and white went a bit crazy here. So white pushed, and he cut, right? So that's one way to answer the Peep, right? It does answer the Peep. And here, after black Atari'd, white actually chose to Utenuki. So then we can see what white's thought process was. I don't want to answer this Peep and take Gote, so I want Sente. And Sente is important, especially in this situation, because you have the white group, you have this white group in the center. It's pretty weak. You have this black group. This black group's not that strong either, So Utenuki is a valuable move, but there's some bad repercussions to white's way of getting Sente as well. It's pretty expensive. I mean, it's a brave way to play. I think maybe also white was motivated by that white was not doing very well in the game. White was behind. So white wanted a way to get initiative, right? Initiative can help you get back into a game. But in my opinion, there are a bit too many drawbacks in this situation. For example, one I could suggest is that that's a good point, Antti. The black group is maybe not that weak, right? Say black connected. Black is not that weak, but white still can, try to take the eye shape. What's black even going to do here? I don't know. It's kind of hard to find a move for black next. Maybe I'm gonna play here because it looks good, and then maybe I'm gonna peep here. I'm going to try to make some ice space, but the point is black needs to make ice space. So when black's fighting to make ice space, white's going to profit. And in the game, well, white doesn't choose that way. He chooses to prioritize the fight on the top side, right? And that's okay in theory, but if black ever gets this capture, white's gonna connect, and then suddenly black's group is, black's group used to be kind of enclosed in white's structure, and now it feels like black's group is stronger than white's structure. It's a very strong Ponuki, very strong group. There used to be a cutting point here at f12, and now there isn't. Wouldn't white h8? Yeah, that's a good point. Yes, you're right. h8 is... actually, I'm not sure if h8 is better. h8 is... It's a very detailed discussion, h8, because when white plays here, it kind of looks like you're taking black's eye, but you're also giving this up. And you're giving it up in Sente because now white has to defend here. So you gave black a bit of extra Moyo for free. And all you got was the eye shape, but black's group is already very strong. So it's, even if it doesn't technically have that eye, it's difficult to attack it even without the eye. So I don't think, oh my, yeah, this white shape's gonna suffer so much. You're gonna play here. If you play here, I'm gonna hane. Maybe you're gonna have to connect here, which is painful. So, I see. Yeah, you wanted to fix the lower cutting point. That's a good point. You want to fix the lower cutting point, and that's also another problem of giving black a Ponuki here. So it's it's a bit difficult. I'm thinking the cut isn't too much of a problem at the moment, because if black goes for something like this, white can just bear it. It's fine-ish, because if black pushes, white's very happy actually, because the center group is getting weak. And yes, that's Auntie's right. That's the other issue with this cutting point, that black can throw a stone here and it's sente. So I can even envision a world where say this happens, suddenly black has like 20 points inside white's own Moyo, right? That's a big price to pay. And of course, black doesn't need to do this now. He can do this later after he takes care of the top side. So, white's choice was very bold. I understand it in the sense that he wants to start another fight because he's behind, but he's not achieving much in the end. And imagine the stress of having a lecture while a pro is watching over your shoulder. I think probably the pro over my shoulder isn't such an issue, because he's not the one I'm trying to teach, so it gets more about the audience actually. You could spin it in the sense that Auntie is technically my boss these days, so that's one way to exert pressure as well. Anyway, to move on maybe to a next example, this game is, we're going further up the level ladder. This game is between, I think, two dans. I think one of them's one dan, yeah, and I don't remember which one this is. Let's see. Oh, okay, yeah. This is interesting. I loved reviewing this game because it's like this big Moyo game, this dream Moyo game. I'd love to play white here. It's so much fun. And black has some options at the moment. He has to choose, well, do I want to pull out the 2 stones? Are these 2 stones worth saving? Do I want to maybe use them for some aji? Do I want to... It's even something I suggested, not at this point, but at different points in the game, was maybe you want to invade here and try to reduce white's Moyo that way. So black has a lot of options. And the kind of thing I'd be tempted to do is maybe attach here, because you have all of this aji around white's shape, right? This is a classic bad shape, and you have all kinds of sente moves. This is sente. Is this sente? Yeah, this is sente as well, technically, isn't it? Wow. Yeah, this should be sente. So maybe wait, is this the best move here? Because if white tries to cap or something, you're gonna wedge and actually this looks very, very questionable. I'm not sure what's going on here. Maybe white's fine, because never mind, white's not fine. White's not fine, because black's gonna play here, or first Atari actually, and then white's in a bit of trouble. So maybe as bizarre as it sounds, maybe this is the right sente move for black locally. In the game, black made a slightly different choice, which is to he wedged to use the aji, and then he immediately played this sequence. And I think it's quite clear what black gained from this. He got some nice yose, right? He has this follow-up later of A. He got quite a lot of points on the lower side that he didn't have before. And that's some kind of profit, but there are repercussions that black needs to keep in mind. This is an interesting one in the sense that it's not strictly speaking bad, these exchanges. There's a world where they make enough sense to play them, but it's quite specific what black needs to do next to make them work. So, what do you guys think are some of the issues with black's exchanges? What are you weakening? What opportunities are you losing, perhaps? Yeah, I also maybe doubt black was playing this thinking of earning points. Though, I think if I'm not sure though. Maybe he thought he wants to earn points and then just pull out the stones, because in the game he pulls out the stones and he thought maybe I might as well earn some points first. I'm not sure. Maybe he just played the exchanges because they're Sante, but he may have had points in mind. Maybe also he was thinking about some interesting Aji that black has later in the game. Let's say just later in the game at some point you're going to play here and maybe you're going to get some nice Yose, So it does have some potential Yose benefits. Of course, assuming your black stones survive, because these stones are not very healthy, these black stones. It's a tough game for black, actually, from this point on. So one of the things I'd point to is that black's 2 stones currently have 2 fewer liberties than they used to, right? Black used to have 1, 2, and now he has none. And that's problematic for black if he wants to pull the stones out, right? Now what black could say is, I'm not interested in pulling the stones out, I'm going to Utenuki now, And then the exchanges make a lot of sense because you're giving up the stones and you're Utenukiing. And unfortunately, what black did was he played these exchanges, which got him some points, but hurt his 2 stones, and then he tried to use the 2 stones anyway, which is a bit risky, And if we see how the game continued, the position became quite good for white. Suddenly, these black stones look, very, very weak. Black has an extra weakness, this cut. White, it looks very much like even if black doesn't die, white's going to get, white's going to solidify his box, his Moyo, by attacking the stones. It's very, very, very questionable. Oh, Godave says, I was also looking at N2 as an option later instead. N2. N2 is interesting. Yeah, N2 is probably good as well. That's the other thing about exchanges, right? When you make exchanges, you're also losing out on the chance to make other exchanges. So black wedged, which gets him something, but he's going to lose the opportunity to play N2. N2 is quite a nice move because if white plays here, you're just killing white, and if white connects this way, then black's Yose is very, very nice. So yeah, N2 is a nice move. Black on the other hand chose to wedge, which I guess is not that much worse for endgame. It's also fine because you're going to get N1 in Sente at least. But after that, he pulled out the stones, and we can see that black's outside is hurt so much by this situation, by his choice to wedge and make these exchanges because he took his own liberties. For example, I would have preferred let's go back to here. We've discussed that this move was black Sente. That's also something that black lost. And black could have very comfortably pulled his stones out with, I don't know, something like this. this is a much better prospect for black globally than in the game, you know. It's though okay, this move is inaccurate. Probably white plays here. So, you know, black suddenly has a lot more room to maneuver in this fight. It's a huge difference. So black was penalized quite a lot by this. To be fair though, I think the exchanges would have been fine had black Tenuki now. Because if you Tenuki now, you're making the argument, well, the two stones were never interesting to me anyways. So, you know, I can get away with my Yose and I'll be fine. So perhaps, in fact, this actually reminds me, I'm not sure if it's the next one I have on the list, but this example reminds me of one that I also have in this file, and it's here. Yes, it's the next one. My order of SGFs was quite fortunate. So this is a very interesting situation because black has just asked white if he's willing to invest a move to protect the 4 stones and just capture. And in the game, white decided not to, so he just attached on the top, made black connect, and then he Tenuki. And I think white's logic was, okay, well, if I'm not planning to connect to save the stones on the top, and you know I'm gonna Tenuki, then if black captures, I don't have this in Sente anymore. So I want to get the stones in Sente, like I want to get this stone in Sente earlier. Yeah, I'm sorry, Silvo. It was too good of an example, you know. I think it's a very, very illustrative one. So yeah. And I think I'll leave it to you guys to consider a bit what the drawbacks of White's decision here was, specifically of this exchange. P18, yes, exactly. P18 is lost. That's the big point. That's the most important point. Corner Aji, yes. You're all correct. So let's say, just for the sake of argument, white decided to capture. And as far as I can tell, capturing or not capturing is debatable. You can choose to Tenuki, you can choose to capture. I would capture because it gives me some very nice Aji in black's corner, which I can use to try to make life later on. But say this Aji didn't exist, I think taking the stone, playing K18, and Tenuki would kind of be equally valuable. But that's a really important thing about this shape, that when white played his attachment, which is you know, a clever idea, it's logical. He kind of forgot about the options he's losing in the corner, and I think white's logic. I actually Silgo, did you see the Aji in the corner? Did you think about it, or did you just not consider it at all? I'm curious. Because if white, the way I interpreted white's play was that white was saying, well, I'm going to Tenuki anyway, so if black captures, I want this exchange. Right. Now this exchange is good. Because white's never, once black captures the 4 stones, these 2 moves, white's never getting them anyway. Aha, okay. So you did realize that you're losing the exchanges. And if I'd guess that your logic was, well, I'm going to Tenuki anyway, so I'm never getting those P18 exchanges, right? So you thought, well, I'm losing P18 anyway, which is correct, except maybe you don't want to lose P18, right? P18 is important. P18 would be just so you could get white stronger, or so moves like S17 or something takes the corner. Yes, exactly. The point with P18 is that you're getting a lot of ice space suddenly. So if we go to the variation where white takes a stone, and let's say black Utenukis to play a big move, which is probably correct. Later in the game, white can play here. And if black answers meekly, then this group is just making life. Can you make life this way? Yes, this is a life. And I think, can black kill if he plays here? Let's figure this out. So, black technically kills white. So black plays here and white's technically dead. But this is a huge source of aji for white. You know, so black, you know, say black tries here. This fight is a nightmare for black. Yeah, white, wait. Yes, correct. Yeah, you're right. White has a ko. White even has a ko locally because he plays this move. Actually, I misread this because I thought black can play T18. But then white just kills. So it's my misread. So what's going to happen is black's going to start this ko. Yeah, it's a ko. But nevertheless, black has so many outside issues that he's probably just going to concede the corner. And then, you know, if you consider that white's capture is followed up by such a comfortable life in the corner, then they, you know, the value suddenly goes up a lot. Why is P19 sente? P19 is not strictly speaking sente. Right? Black can choose to not answer it, but then white will make life. Right? Like, actually, if I were black, Dekros makes a good point in the sense that if I were black, I'm not sure if this exchange is good for me. Back to the topic of exchanges. I'm not sure that this exchange is favorable. So as black, maybe what I would do is I would Utenuki again, and then, you know, white's not going to play either move anytime soon. You know, this is Jose. And then maybe later I can think about what exchanges I want to play, what's kind of big, you know. Maybe this Han is bigger. It could well be bigger. So that's also something to consider in the spirit of talking about exchanges, let's say. And also maybe something else that Silko didn't consider was that, you know, maybe he assumed that black's going to take directly. So then you would never get the P18 Jose anyway. But if white evaluated that the stones on the top aren't very big, he should have maybe considered that black would maybe also evaluate that the stones aren't big enough. So then, you know, they wouldn't address the stones until later in the game. So then by playing this N15 exchange, white has very much worsened his situation locally if he does capture in the end. And there's no guarantee that black's going to actually play K18 himself because, you know, it's debatable whether the value of this is high enough. And indeed, if we look at later in the game, I believe later in the game, white did capture this himself. So let's wait. This is the wrong variation. So here, white eventually captured, right? And if you consider, look at this corner's dead now. But here, at this point, white would have very happily lived after taking here. And we can say white was, you know, even though the white's reasoning is clear, white's reasoning isn't bad, he was penalized quite heavily for this decision. Where are we? Yeah. So that was one of the first. That was an example that I thought was very interesting because white is really not being unreasonable. There's a thought process, a clear thought process, but unfortunately it's a bit flawed. S for sensei. 10S. 10 sensei. That's Santi's username on KGS, so anyway. So the next example is also a game that Sealgo participated in, but this time it's not Sealgo making the bad exchanges. So that's good for him, I guess. In this game, I remember. Oh yeah. In this game, White has already. White's already in a bit of trouble because he got captured pretty much unconditionally in his own corner, right? If we look at this was White's corner on the top left, and it doesn't look like White's corner. Black has more points already. Black has more strength. White's group on the outside is a bit weak. So we can say Black got a very good result so far. And White chose to make some exchanges that look pretty natural. You're going to peep and peep again. And you got two good exchanges, right? You got two stones on the outside, Black played on the inside, right? But Black also got something else now, or let's say White lost something else that he maybe wasn't thinking about when he played these exchanges. So we can, in my opinion, White's exchanges are actually a bit worse for him overall because of what he lost. That makes h14 weaker. Okay, yes, you're right. So how does it make h14 weaker? What is White losing? What are the options that White is depriving himself of from this situation? You know, the Mark group doesn't have many liberties, right? And in the game, suddenly it has like, 7. Yeah, exactly. The Fanshawe and Godave are completely right. It's all about the h17. Something else that Fanshawe mentions, which I actually hadn't really thought about, but it's also a good point. It makes this weaker, right? Here, when White pushes in Hanes, let's say Black doesn't have the option of double Hane because White's gonna. Oh, I guess he does. Okay, never mind. He has the option anyway. I'm misreading. But it's harder for Black to play these shapes because White has more center moves, right? And I hadn't really thought about that specific aspect, that h12 is also important, but you're right. And, oh, yeah, Pancho misread that too. Well, even if we misread that, the point still stands that it's still easier for White to play here because, something like this is definitely Sente, for example. Now, if White wanted to get that, I mean, what White's probably going to do is just extend. But if suddenly these exchanges happen, Black's shape is much stronger, so the point still stands. So that's an interesting. It's very nice that we're finding more of these details because these kind of discussions about pluses and minuses are what defines whether an exchange is good or bad. So it's nice that we're looking at it in a bit more detail. The factor I was thinking about that Godave mentioned was h17. So at the moment, h17 is a forcing move. If Black plays here, White can even follow up with g18, which is pretty powerful. So, Black is basically forced to take the stones, and then then there's all kinds of connections. Black can Hane, but then White plays here, and as a follow-up, he has the connection in Sente, and we can say that White's stones on the outside are actually a lot safer than they were in the game if he has the h17 stuff. So even though it looks like these exchanges are, you know, just normal exchanges that White makes, White maybe didn't look at all of the repercussions of his exchange. And we can also say safely that in this game, White paid quite heavily for getting these exchanges, because later in the game, let's try to find it. Later in the game, White ended up dying with these stones, right? These stones are just dead. And, you know, we can theorize that White wouldn't have been dead if he simply had these moves from before. It would have been harder to kill, at least. Speaking of exchanges, White should not exchange f16 anytime soon in the original position. f16? Yeah, f16 is also a questionable exchange, because it's not it's not that great, because ultimately what it's doing is it's reducing the liberties of White's stones. So later it's easier for Black to, you know, something like the turn is more powerful. It's potentially before, when Black tries to go out, White can get that. But if White exchanges this first, which maybe a lot of people would do kind of without thinking, because it seems like a natural exchange, later you can't capture and get that. You need to ladder it, right? So Godave's right. That's the kind of exchange we need to look out to not do, let's say. So Yakago, I think in many of these exchanges, the person who made the exchange often didn't think they were exchanging, but rather thought they were forcing and gaining. Yeah. We in a lot of these exchanges, it depends on the exchange, but in a lot of these exchanges, the opponent doesn't have a choice on how to answer. And I think that's maybe one of the reasons that bad exchanges can feel good to make, because you're pushing around your opponent, you know? If we go back to the example, to this example, right, where Black peeped, it's very interesting that Black himself is playing an exchange, this exchange is fine, right? Just White connects, Black gained a little bit, life goes on. And I think Black maybe played this exchange because he thought it's useful. Another reason to play this exchange is that it just feels good. It feels good to push your opponent around and make him do stuff, you know? And it also feels bad to be pushed around and be the one who is made to do stuff. So for example, White, I think in this situation, one of the reasons that he tried so hard to get to get Sente was not just that he wants to fight on the top side, or that, no, I think potentially it has a lot to do with the psychology of that White didn't want to take Godave for that peep, you know? If you look at, I think, for example, something that's very common of is, well, in general, is that people are very reluctant to answer peeps, because it feels bad, right? You get peeped, it feels bad to answer. It feels kind of meek, right? So people often don't answer a peep, and that can be good sometimes, it can also be bad sometimes. It's a double-edged sword, right? I think there's a difference in the mentality depending on if you think of it as a forcing move or an exchange. Yes. That's actually a very good point, because let's say whenever you make an exchange, there's no implication that someone was forced to do something. When it's a forcing move, you've already kind of admitted that you're being forced to do something, and that usually doesn't feel very nice. I think all forcing moves are exchanges. To be fair, not all exchanges are forcing moves, right? Exchanges can sometimes, anything is an exchange if you look at Go philosophically enough, right? But I chose exchanges that are forcing moves just because they're kind of easier to talk about. They're more like one move for one move, kind of localized, right? So I chose forcing moves because they're easier, and also because I think people make more mistakes around forcing moves because of the psychological factor that people like playing forcing moves and people don't like answering forcing moves. And don't ask what the position can do for you, ask what you can do for the position. That's an interesting perspective as well. I think I remember when I was maybe like I remember 3Q to 1 done, I used to think that if I tried hard enough, I could like I whenever I was behind, I used to like on the board, I used to think, okay, if I try hard enough, I'm going to like kill my opponent, or I'm going to manage to do something spectacular on the board and achieve something. And that doesn't really work that way. Like you just work with what the position gives you. You know, that's what you eventually learn to do because the alternative doesn't really work out. There's also an edge that if you're thinking about playing the sequence A, B, C, you should consider if you can just play C immediately. Yeah, I mean, then that's a very interesting kind of situation because say that you believe, oh, I have A, B, so let's play C. Then your opponent answers C, and then you try to play A, and white doesn't answer B. So it's a bit difficult, right? But in general, it doesn't sound like a bad idea. Let's go back. I think I have one more example, right? Do I have one more example? Yeah, I do. And this one is maybe not that difficult, but I think it's also quite constructive. And if we look at this situation, this has kind of become a running fight. White kind of decided to push, right, and fight, fight his way out. And, black connects. And then maybe the kind of thing we can observe is that black has some weaknesses, right? His stones on the lower side aren't that well connected. White himself is not very strong. So maybe I would maybe consider this kind of move, just pulling my stones out and, thinking about what to do with the aji on the lower side later. But white chose to play this exchange directly. And I think that the idea behind this exchange is maybe to, say black answers here, which is what he did in the game. There's all kinds of cutting points. They don't work now, but maybe white was thinking that, these cutting points look kind of scary for black to deal with. So, it's something that white can use in the future. So whenever I want to play a forcing move, I should look at what my next move will be and decide if I should go for it right away instead of forcing. That's a possibility. That's what Anti is suggesting, but it can be risky, right? Because depending on the situation, the forcing move won't be answered anymore if you rely on it too much, right? Like, let's say, as an extreme example, let's say that you can only live a group because you have a forcing exchange that, you're threatening 10 points, right? So you should probably play that exchange before you try to live the group, not afterwards, because this group's going to be worth a lot more than 10 points, So sometimes you have that to consider. In general, it's a nice philosophy, though, to not necessarily play the exchange. In any case, about this situation, right? White went for an exchange, which looks kind of good because it has all kinds of cutting options, which maybe don't work now, but will maybe work later. White just pulled out his stones, and there's some options to think about later in the game. But, in the game, what if black plays here, and, maybe it's not that clear how white can follow up, and black already nearly has point on the lower side. The AI inside my head says white should actually play O4 and not P5. Yes, yes, that's the funny thing about this specific situation. Is that this is another one of those exchanges where you're losing the opportunity to play something else. And something that white missed was that the real forcing move in this situation is O4. And O4 is probably nicer than P5 for several reasons. First of all, it's very hard for black to answer. If black answers here, then first of all, white's stone is further out than black's, so it's more powerful. And black's shape is very questionable. He has all of these stones that are, pressed in. And I'm already considering, let's say white jumps out. It's hard for black to find a next move because the shape is ruined. And Miko says that yes, I considered P5 a thank you move, and you're correct. You're correct. It's mostly helping out black's shape and getting black some eye shape. And here instead white missed out. Wait, where's the exchange? White missed out on the opportunity to make black's shape much worse, right? For example, the computer says black should play here. Black should play P5 himself now. And once white pulls out the stones somehow, black can't really play on the side as easily anymore because white always has O2 now. He can always kind of establish himself on the lower side. So I think also O4 is intuitively a better move than P5 because O4 is kind of looking more towards the outside. It's influencing the outside more. Not like O6 itself matters other than the pressure on P7. Not that O6 matters other than the pressure on P7. Yeah, I guess the main point of O6 is that it makes white's shape bad. Let's say that's why black plays this move in the first place. It's like, oh, you can go out, but I'm going to ruin your shape if you do it. So, and that I guess is all for the examples of times that people have made mistakes that I've seen. But I have a couple of examples that are a bit more interesting, let's say, that are not entirely clear. And I wanted to start it off by kind of doing a bit of, let's say, taking a look at some common Josekis. Yeah, time for the exchange challenge problems. Indeed, Antti. So one idea I had was, hey, we can look at some examples of exchanges played that are not so good from NGD games, but something else we can do is look at some common Joseki patterns that one may find and discuss exchanges there, because there are all kinds of exchanges that are played all the time in Josekis that we take for granted, like we don't think of them, we just play them, and I think this is a classic example. This is probably the most common Joseki I have seen in all the NGD games, in all of them. It's very, very, very common. And something that struck me is that every time black plays this exchange, black always plays f4, white always answers g3. And if you look at professional games, black also almost always plays f4. But I wanted to discuss a bit, maybe, are we actually able to play f4? Well, not are we able, but is it actually a good idea to exchange f4? So I'd ask you guys to be to have to maybe suggest some reasons why f4 is a good exchange to make, and some reasons why f4 is not a good exchange to make, because there are reasons for and against making it, and it's very close. That's why you can choose to not play f4, or you can choose to play f4, but both of them are okay. let's h3 instead. h3. h3? h3 comes with like some idea of attacking white stones, but that's maybe not that easy at the moment because white's shape is very strong. I feel like h3, see here, and now white Utenuki'd for some reason. Now you go for h3. Or actually, you peep and then you go for h3. And this is painful for white. I always thought of f4 as is the only good when you have some stones on the top, so you're building your framework. Yeah, that's one good reason to play f4. Say Utenuki and white plays f4. Black is never ever making influence on the left side anymore, right? This area is basically impossible to develop for black, all of this area. So say we had a, for argument's sake, let's say we had a Joseki here, right? And we had this kind of situation. And, you know, it's a very natural way to progress for black to say, I want this exchange because I want to build a Moyo, you know? I want, you know, I have a framework. So that's one good reason to play f4. It's not the only reason to play f4. So I'd maybe disagree with your point that it's only that with Anna's point that f4 is only good when you want a Moyo, but that's one of the reasons that makes it good, right? So I kind of like playing b3, and as black, and if white pushes f4, I can pincer. You pincer h3? Do you pincer with h3? Because if you pincer with h3, I think the most common answer is you literally just play g2. And you just play it calm and you make two eyes on the lower side. And then it's not clear if this is another interesting exchange. Is this a good exchange, right? Professionals usually say it's not a good exchange for black and you're not going to do this. So usually this is, I'm sure a lot of you will know the classic sequence of G2. G2, this is a, you know, an AlphaGo, some, you know, AlphaGo stuff, I think. Wait, did I get the order wrong? I think I got the order wrong. Black pushes, white cuts, damn. And this whole discussion, right? This whole Joseki exists. The only reason it exists is because black says, I want to attack white, but if I play this, white just answers with g2. So I want to get this first, and now I can attack white. And white says, no, you can't, and then you start fighting. And so I'm going to suggest a few of my own reasons, maybe, and I'm sure Antti will also want to chip in on his own reasons to play f4. One of them that Anna found was f4 helps build the Moyo. Another one is that it significantly reduces the value of c4. So the value of the stone. So say black is kind of compelled to protect here, and one of the reasons is that say white plays here, and now here black stones aren't that you know, happy. Black stones are kind of cramped. Once black gets this move, white can play this, but black doesn't really mind. Black will just, you know, Keima or something. He can even Utenuki, you know, Utenuki is very possible. And in fact, if you look at professional games, it's very common for black to play the exchange and then both players to leave c4 for a very long time. So it's kind of interesting that sometimes black plays b3, but if black ever plays f4, neither player touches c4 for like the next 100 moves, you know? And that's one of the purposes of f4 if you want sente, right? I think one of them is I want to push and, you know, build a moyo, right? Maybe I want the option to push or to keima to build a moyo in the future. Another good reason is I want to Utenuki, but I don't want this to happen because that's very severe. Or not very severe, but it's more severe than I would like it to be. And I think maybe Antti can suggest his reason. And then I actually want to discuss some of the reasons that this exchange could be bad because you're also losing something, let's say. I'll simply play f4 when I dislike white getting f4. Okay. Yeah. I guess there are other situations where, I mean, in another hypothetical situation, let's make a situation where white has like some promising moyo stuff, right? So now this f4 is starting to look like a hotspot, right? Because if white gets it, white's looking very good here, right? This stuff, this area is, you know, big influence. It's very nice. I mean, of course, black can live there and stuff, but, you know, it's a nice framework for white to develop. On the other hand, if black gets this, now suddenly white has this high stone, but is being kind of pressed into the ground, you know? So it's also good potentially to limit white's own influence. And is another valid reason if black, for example, has q4, q3, q4, q3. So the bottom is not that important anymore. Yes, that's also another good way to look at it. Let's say if the bottom for some reason is not very important, and let's maybe present a classic Joseki where the bottom side will not be that important, then maybe white is not going to play here anymore. If you think about it, maybe white is not very urgently going to play here. But if, you know, it doesn't hurt black to play like this because you're very much forcing white into the small side. In fact, if I were white, I would consider Utenukiing now because I don't want to play h3 because it's on the small side, you know? But if by playing like this, black is forcing you to Utenuki, not forcing, but compelling you to Utenuki something like h3, then it's a good reason to push like this. So there's lots of reasons to play f4, which is obviously why people play it. I think the main reason you wouldn't play f4 that I've been thinking about is that it kind of makes white's stone stronger, right? So if we look at the normal variation that AlphaGo taught us, right? So AlphaGo is going to teach us play b3, right? f4, black peeps g2, and then you start all of this fight, right? And what black is very much trying to point out is that white has a weakness at g2, right? And if black were to push, you're fixing that weakness, and you're losing the opportunity to ever peep g2, to use it, you know? And therefore, I could imagine that a situation where black is rather thick on the right side, like maybe he has some stones here for whatever reason, is maybe a good situation to try to fight there. Because you have more reasons to keep white a bit unstable there. If you don't play f4 if you want b3 to be sent there. Yeah. That's something else you can consider, which is that once you play b3, if you play b3 at this point, white needs to answer basically. Like, I've never seen a professional Utenuki this situation, but if black plays this first, then b3 isn't sente anymore, right? And it's a big move, right? It's a big move that gets you some points. It you know, it's valuable. And by pushing f4, you lost the opportunity to play it now. You can do it, but it's a bit too small to do it, usually. Here the katago move values. In the Joseki after the attachment. I'm not sure I understand those numbers, but every move is 11 points. I don't quite understand the katago values, but I see an interesting move suggestion, which is g5. And maybe g5 is an interesting concept because it's also developing towards the top side. It's also keeping the option of peeping g2. You can also attach it g3. There's a lot more options after g5, so it's an interesting move. I assume while doesn't double hane there if you wanted Moyo, because black would cut right away at g3. Yeah, white, I think you mean double hane here. That's interesting because this double hane probably shouldn't be a very good way to play for white, because white, let's say black cuts. First of all, white is forced to make life here, which we've already established that these moves aren't that big. And then black just has a relatively strong outside. Maybe he's going to play here or something. And then g4 doesn't look that nice. Yeah, I used to exchange f4 a lot, but now I need a good reason for it, or I'll just leave it. I usually exchange f4 by default, because I don't like it when white gets f4 himself. Even if there's no prerequisites, you know, like the direction of play being good, I don't feel comfortable with white getting f4. So that's why I play f4 usually. I also play f4 because I like getting moyos and frameworks, and f4 helps me do that. But it's nice to not take f4 for granted, because I don't think I've seen very few examples in NGD games of black playing b3 instead of f4, or I haven't seen any of playing Utenuki, you know? So it's just something I wanted to discuss as an, you know, the kind of thing you can consider in a normal Joseki sequence. I really want to play g5 in my games now. I might try it, actually. Time to start playing b3 to surprise Oscar. Yeah. You know, I might... When white plays b3, I kind of dislike it because I don't know this g2 stuff very well. It's a very, like, reading-heavy sequence, and I don't know it by heart. So it's very, like, tough, you know? So as white, I would usually just connect here and just, you know, the computer just thinks it's a slight minus, so whatever. It's not a big deal. The history of this Joseki is funny, how it evolved for both sides to realize how f4 is the vital point. Yeah. Okay, wait. It's been a while. Maybe it's time. Maybe it's about time for me to wrap up. It's a pity because I was like, okay, if I run out of examples, I want I really want to discuss these, you know, fuseki, these common Joseki exchanges that we take for granted. And I have like 3 different examples, and I also have 3 different examples that I put in games that I saw in games, in NGD games. And unfortunately, we're not going to get to those, but I would have loved to. I'll save it for some other lecture, maybe, if I can. But yeah, I'm gonna wrap up for now. Before I go, is there like any questions you guys want to ask? Something else you want to discuss? G5 is a move. Blackie reviewed a game of the top female Korean players the other day where G5 was played. Okay. I see. I might try it actually then. I have a game tomorrow, rated game, so I might try it. Yeah, you're welcome, guys. I had fun making it. I was a bit nervous, also because I wasn't meant to do this lecture. I kind of started. I was meant to do it only abruptly, So I was I only found out I'm doing it on Thursday, so I was a bit nervous, but it worked out. I had fun actually. So yeah, you're welcome, guys. And thanks for coming. And yeah, see you around.